you. My name's Kadi McKean. I am the community manager for open source at Reversing Labs. And you can see I'm with these fine folks today here, and actually our room is right out there. So if something strikes a chord with you here, I'm happy to continue the conversation out there, and also pawn you off to someone who might be smarter than me. So there's that. So a little bit about me. This is Milo. Now you can see my in all his glory. I'm based out of Alexandria, Virginia. I host the 10X Insights podcast with my buddy called Steve Poole, who's a Java champion. So deep in the developer community, especially in open source. So we're looking for those stories where people are really telling us about the secret sauce that makes them them and what everybody should know about it, right? It's not something that should be kept a secret on what makes you a 10X. So it's really about educational resources and how to level up your game. I'm also a co-organizer for DevOps Days DC. We just had it in September. Yeah, we have that annually. And then I'm also a Penn Stater. So if you want to talk to me about football right now, this is not the year to do it, okay? It's not been a very good season. But that's my life in a nutshell. So RL is paying for me to be here today, so I am just going to briefly talk you through who Reversing Labs is before we get into the meat of potatoes of it. Otherwise, my boss might be angry at me, so here goes nothing, right? Reversing Labs is in the top 100 Fortune 500 companies. We have a 27 petabyte data lake of malware, right? And we've done that through running our binary analysis on it. 27 petabytes is a lot of data, right? No, nothing? No laughs. Okay, good. See, I need some feedback. It's late in the day. I need this, okay? So we have a few different products that all go through that data analysis, and we can tell you different things about what you're looking at in regards to your malware or actually your open source, right? So that's helped us pivot to looking at software supply chain security issues with being able to track and trace those third-party components across the life cycle, as well as telling you, hey, something doesn't look right today and we need to fix it because it's open source, guys. That's gonna happen. You just don't know when. So let's get into what I want to talk about. Anybody know where this is?
A museum.
It is a museum. There you go, buddy. Yeah, I like that. No. So I'm from DC, the Museum of Natural History. I love this museum just because there's so much you can look at, right? It's a jam. But does anybody know what goes into making a museum?
Curating.
Curating is a good one. Look at you reading the title of today. What else?
Preservation.
Preservation is part of it.
Preventative maintenance.
Sure. So there's a lot of stuff for people that goes into making a museum a museum. You can kind of think of this as an application, which is the little fun journey we're going to go on today. So think of our museum as an application. But really, when you get down to it, brass tacks, how do you decide what goes into that museum, right? So there's a lot that can go into it, and you need to have things like preservation, right? Or maybe insurance. But how do you decide what actually goes into an exhibit? What people are going to want to see.
Really big hope diamond.
Okay, that's the part I like to go to, and I wish I was smart like the Louvre guys and could steal it. But we're not there yet.
Historically important to save it?
Yeah. So actually what you can do, just like when you're building software, is you start with your requirements, right? So you're thinking about, hey, what story am I trying to tell here? What is the narrative I want people to get away from this exhibit? The audience, who is this exhibit geared towards? Is this for maybe senior citizens? Is this for kids? Is it for families? Is it for everybody? Do I actually need to have stuff like people who, does it need to have ramps for handicapped people? Do I need to have little markers, right, where you can read Braille? There's a lot of different things that you think about going into these exhibits while also looking at the acquisition logistics, right? So once you've decided what your requirements are and the types of exhibits you want in there, whether that's new artists, part of the museum's collection, or you're actually going to go search out for a private collection, how do you actually acquire those? Where is it coming from? How long is it going to take? Do I need insurance? Do I have to be insured in case something happens? And is the person I'm borrowing it from going to get paid if something happens? And then most importantly is the layout. So think of this as like your overall architecture, right? Where are these pieces going to go and in what flow? How is that going to help me shape my story of what I want people to walk away with today? And lastly is impact, right? What do I want the audience to walk away with? Do I want them to keep continuing a conversation about this? How is it helping either socially tell a story, culturally impactful? Is it important? So these are some of the things you have to think about as you're doing this. So how am I relating this back to applications, right? I know you're all like, why is she telling us about museums today? This isn't any kept secret, right? So just like a museum, you're borrowing a lot of stuff, maybe from your own collection. It's really from someone else. And just like applications, 90% of your code comes from external suppliers. This should not shock anyone, given the day we live in. Most people know this, but I like to put this up here just in case this is a newsflash for folks. And why is it this high? It's because you could either do it yourself, which is going to take a lot of time. You could rewrite it, which I don't know why you want to do that. Maybe it's job security. Good for you. But really, it's someone's already done it, and they have that piece that you need, so it's easier to use. There's a community out there that probably supports it, right? And things like that that you can get from borrowing from other people. So I like to use this little cartoon. It makes me giggle because I like Bob, who's in Nebraska. He just is one little guy. A lot of times, though, when we're looking at these different applications, people forget that it's these open source maintainers, and oftentimes it's just one little random guy in Nebraska who is really holding onto an important piece of function that supports a lot of applications in open source, or maybe in your core business logic, right? If you think about it, Log4j, when it happened many moons ago, I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I really planned on having a great holiday break. But that like really ruined my week, okay? And it continued to ruin people's weeks because they couldn't find it, right? So there's someone thanklessly just maintaining these different pieces of your architecture. Get to know them. How can you support them? I don't just say this because I have a program for open source maintainers, but it's a really crucial thing that you understand. It's these people usually have a 9-to-5 job, and they do this out of the kindness of their own heart for the greater good. So just something to think about as we go here. So what happens when something goes wrong with these applications is really what you need to think about. And this is an example that just happened last month. Anybody use Chalk? It is a top 10 NPM package. I guarantee you someone in here is using it, or they're using some dependency that depends on it, and you might not even know. Long story short, though, what happened was yes, I got pwned. Two-factor authentication email, reset email looked very legitimate. So what happened? This guy got hacked, someone got his keys, and then wreaked havoc all over the packages that he maintained because he had access to his GitHub. What that means then is for those of you that are using Chalk or other packages that this guy maintains, because I'll be honest, there's a lot, this guy is well known, it wreaked havoc probably on a system you have or an application. And it's because of simple little things like this. So what is my point being is that we need to start looking at more data on these packages when you're going to at time of selection. Having things like being in the top 10, yes, popularity is great. Why do I say that? There's safety in the herd. So as you'll see, this one has, 53 billion downloads? Like, that's wild to me. I don't know more than 10 people at a time, so 53 billion downloads just seems like a lot. But again, if you look here, right, it's 4 contributors who are just helpingly maintain this. And then the other thing you need to really pay attention to is the dependence. So yes, there is Chalk, you might be using it, but it depends on so many more things, or things depend on it, right? So the point here is you want to make sure that the components that you're picking are staying up to date, and they also have some popularity, because that usually means they're supported, usually. And we'll get to that in a moment. So here's another way that you can also just look at some of this data, right? So a lot of times when I'm talking with people, and especially here, in the past few weeks where people are like, oh, well, I'm just worried about vulnerabilities. And I'm like, cool. It's something that I think personally a lot of us have seen is more table stakes nowadays, where it's like if you have a tool that's looking at these different packages, sure, vulnerabilities is something you should be looking at. But at the end of the day, there is so much more you need to be thinking about. And I say that because just like the chalk guy happened, are you leaking secrets should be one of those things you should be thinking about when you are selecting these packages, right? I don't want to leak my keys. That guy probably didn't want to leak his keys, but it happens. What about licensing issues? Anybody remember what happened with Cisco's OpenWRT? No. Give you the quick snapshot of this. So there was a router once upon a time called WRT. They had a bad license in it, which actually made them have to open source the whole router. So OpenWRT, became the open source version of it. WRT was no longer a product they could sell because they had a licensing issue. I don't know about you, but if I was offering a product and I had one of those licenses in there, one, I would be worried I'm going to be fired, but two, I realized I've violated a licensing agreement and now have to give my source code to public for their use. So these are things you need to be thinking about. What about tampering, right? That's another one we're starting to see a lot. And that's where we're having some of those issues with signatures where there's maybe a misalignment or a signature's missing and it's that digital piece that you need for a final sign-off to say like, hey, the maintainer looked at this, it's updated, it's good to go, right? And then, you have your vulnerabilities, but answer me this. If you have malware in a package, is your day gonna be worse than just a vulnerability? I'm gonna go with probably. I think my day, my week might be ruined for a little bit. So there's just more than just vulnerabilities you have to be thinking about when we're looking at the types of packages we want to use. So pop quiz, like I said, I know it's 3 o'clock and a lot of us are like, it's warm in here, we're tired, our brains are on overload. And personally, as you can tell, I need the audience interaction, so I will be doing some pop quizzes. What is the difference between a direct and a transitive dependency? You got your hand up. You were first.
I'm going to guess that a transitive dependency is a dependency upon which one of your dependencies depends.
I like that. I'll take it. I'll take it. We'll take one more person. Maybe we'll get a little clearer in the back.
Transitive dependency is the nested library, one of the software open source libraries. So, for example, if you have a library A and B is your direct, but C, D, E, so on. Your nested libraries are transitive libraries which are hidden and hard to find them if they're not.
Yeah, good. Keyword is hidden there, right? So take a photo. This, I think, is the easiest way to explain what the difference between direct and transitive is. Why am I showing you this? Any guesses?
Really, because we all have more than we realize.
There you go. Someone is paying attention to me today. I love this. This is great. Yeah. So really, what I wanted to say, though, is just before we go further down the road, just to make sure we're all at that foundational level, is we understand what the difference between direct and a transitive one. So a direct is like, hey, I invited one friend to a party. That friend comes with me. Where it gets weird, though, is like I invite Dustin to a party, but then Dustin invites 5 friends I don't know about. Those are the transitive friends or hobos who are just coming to hang out at a party because I probably have free food. But that, just another way to think about it, right?
They're bringing their friends too. Yeah, so they're bringing their friends and their friends'
Yeah.
friends.
And then there's a hole in the wall, and then we have a problem because my mom's coming home. Okay? So you see where this is going, right? So I just want to make sure we're all set at the same level for this. Now, I personally like to think of these dependencies, this is gnarly. If you can read this, you have great vision, and I just don't have it. Or if you know how to look into that to find out who relies on what, God help you. I personally don't have the vision for it. It's a lot to go through. It'll probably take me weeks to even understand that the more I scroll and scroll out. If you think about it, right, I like to think of these dependency graphs as kind of like those dusty lights that you pull out of the attic every year at Christmas, right? they're always tied up in a crazy ball, and you somehow have to get them to undo so you can hang them up however your partner wants them, or maybe you like to have them in a certain way, right? But the point being is it can't be in the ball. Where everybody goes first, typically, is they just want to make sure it works, right? So you just plug it in to make sure the lights work. You're like, fine, right? Like, we're good. We can figure it out. It might take you a while to untangle that, just like your dependency graph. But as long as it's working, you're like, heck, we're good. But what if the bulb isn't working? Then you have to go through line by line, each little individual light bulb, and figure out where the broken one is. And then pray you have a backup, right, that you can replace it with. Now, if you have an older lights, you might not have a backup, right? You might have to think of like totally replacing this. I personally just think this is a good analogy though, to kind of see how we view these dependencies or applications and what we're doing, and just simply put with those Christmas lights we have to drag out every year. Hold on 1 second. Oh no. My mouse went weird. Okay. So let's get back to the museum, because I'm a lover of analogies, right? Does anybody know where the Gardner Museum is? Look at you. You might be an art history guy, huh? Yeah, so anybody know what happened with this art heist? I mean, I know we're all talking about the Louvre, and I'll get to that in a moment, but has anybody heard of this? It's okay. I'm guessing most of you haven't. So Isabella Gardner Stewart, she was like a wealthy lady in the 1800s, collected a lot of art because her husband was loaded, right? So when she passed, she made this huge museum. It had tons of different stuff, like we're talking millions and millions of dollars. Well, back in 1990, two men dressed as Boston cops entered the museum, and they stole 13 works that were valued over 500 million, including paintings by Vermeer, Rembrandt, and Degas, okay? Well-known artists. These are crazy. Problem is, though, cool for the guys who got in and got the stuff. This is the largest art heist in history. None of the stuff has ever been recovered. And this happened in the 90s, right? Wild. And to be honest, the museum is still offering a $10 million reward that will lead to any type of recovery service. So they're still like actively investigating it. The reason I'm talking to you about this, though, is when something goes wrong, right, like we talked about those lights or what happened with Quicks, is that do you replace it? Do you have insurance? What do you do? What is the impact? So when we think about impact on these types of things, there really is a cultural impact. You're talking about famous paintings, and it's like, okay, so my story now has a gap in it. Do I leave the gap in the story to tell people, like, hey, this happened here? You know what I mean? Like, we have this cool painting, but we don't anymore. It also kind of adds to the lure of the museum, right? But what do? Do you find a new painting that you can just pop in? Do you ask, like, another museum? Do you have something in your collection? What do you do? And then it's also damaging to the integrity of the museum. So when you think about it, right, if a maintainer had one of these issues with their, a package or routinely has it, their personal brand is going to be impacted. And people are going to start thinking like, hey, this guy probably doesn't have all his security stuff like up to snuff. So like, maybe I'm not going to use his stuff because, it's licensing issues, or he's getting hacked every other Tuesday. And honestly, it's just too much for me to deal with, right? So there's that. So it's personal brand. And then you also have the emotional and symbolic loss. And just reminder that like, art, it takes time for people to appreciate it. You can't just create something tomorrow and then it's like, oh, it's worth 500 million. No, like these paintings were made like 300, 400 years ago, right? And they're just gone. They could be hiding in someone's like shed in Boston. Who knows? We'll find out one day. Security. So other type of thing you have to worry about. So you have your cultural impact, then you have security. So what is good that happened out of an attack like this, and same thing with Log4j, is that it actually raises standards on museum security, or it's raising standards on software supply chain security in regards to Log4j. By this I mean, hey, cool that you rely on this company who then probably contracted out to people. Did you vet they were actually Boston cops coming in for work that day? Like, what ID did you see? Or does he just have a sweet rental uniform that tricked you? Okay? So there's more vigorous standards that go into this. There's also an increased awareness around the provenance and acquisition policies. So you actually have to go through a couple more hoops now when you are acquiring these works of arts, and there needs to be more insurance involved that like, hey, nothing's gonna happen to it. I'm gonna get the same integrity I gave it to you with back, right? And then there's also the insurance and financial pressures, right? So I'm sure nobody wants to have a $10 million reward going out for 30 years, but like, hey, here we are. So there's more pressure on having secure financial health when it comes to these pieces of works, or just the art museum in general, to make sure that these pieces stay where they are and they're not going to get harmed in any way, shape, or form. And lastly is the legal and investigative, right? So we've gone through cultural, we've gone through security, and the legal stuff. So this actually heightened cooperation. This is a good thing, I would say, is it heightened cooperation between the museums, as well as, you know, international policing departments. So you think about like Interpol and other international agencies, because not for nothing, art fraud is very lucrative. Just like we're seeing hacking being very lucrative nowadays. There's also more federal legislation on cultural property and theft. So it's a higher severity in crime when you're actually taking cultural artifacts, is what we're seeing them as. So whoever did rob the Louvre, I'm sure they're going to get one of those. If they're ever caught, they will probably get something on like stealing cultural property. And then continuing the reward and investigative expenses. It's costly to keep investigating that. So why do I bring all this up? And I bring this up because just like in applications, right, we're looking at people who, you know, are doing their best, but oftentimes, you know, one of these studies that I was looking at found that software developers make suboptimal choices 69% of the time with respect to updating third-party dependencies. So it's a little scary. I don't know about you guys, and I wouldn't want to have my name associated with that. It's just what I found in the study. These guys who are looking at different third-party libraries that they're being brought in. Why am I showing you this? Because I just really think we need to drive home that, like, hey, poor decisions have been made, okay, guys? And we need to just do a better job. And what we'll get to is how we can start making better decisions through education and just having some basic fundamental principles on how we go about dependency management from time of selection and all the way through maintenance.
How did they define suboptimal? And I'm not saying like,
yeah,
there's certainly bad decisions, but the definition of optimal is pretty vague.
Yeah, it can be pretty vague.
Contextually can mean different things to different kinds of applications.
Yeah, so I'll have to find the exact study I used. It was like from a few years ago, I think through Linux Foundation. So there was like certain criteria that they were using. Like, is it on the bleeding edge, or is it like an old package and you're picking like 5 versions ago that got hacked? So I think they were looking through some of that data, but that is a good question that I can dig further into and get information on. One of the things that we found, you know, at Reversing Labs is we do, like everybody else, does some research, but I think this is a really cool graph that just, when it comes to cyber risk posed in open source packages, especially like mainstream and social media, this is where our research kind of came in and showed where we typically saw flaws in like the top 10 packages, right? So what does this mean? It means there's, you know, there of course is going to be outlier incidents, you know, but there's an even bigger risk with the open source ecosystem with massive flaws in serious exploitable software configurations. So I think this highlights the issues lurking in popular open source packages, especially, you know, with NPM, PyPy. We also have like Ruby gems data, but I didn't put that up there because I personally don't see too many Ruby people out there. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me. But I think what this just shows is you're getting down to millions of downloads, and in it contains a critical flaw. So we have this volume of people downloading these packages that are probably in the top 10, willingly, knowingly, raising their hand and being like, it has a defect, but hey, I'm going for it today. And there's going to be reasons, right? Like different risk appetites, but I think this is just a good way to show that. And going back to this is I think this also just goes in to show that, as I was saying, how art fraud or art, thievery is extremely lucrative. This is also extremely lucrative to hackers, because this is a fertile ground for them to go and be like, hey, I know people are downloading this stuff, so like, how do I get in? Just as we're working hard to keep them out, they're working twice as hard to get in. And these are places where they want to go and hang out because they know they're highly downloadable and they're everywhere in the ecosystem. So I think that just highlights that real quick. This is another one where we looked at kind of our top 30 open source packages from NPM, PyPy, and I was saying Ruby Gems. And it's showing you just across these packages, what's high severity possibilities, and then across top 10 Python packages we scanned, there was an average of 134 flaws per package, which I find that crazy. And yes, I had to read to make sure I had the numbers correct, but I find that a really high volume. So, I think there's a lot of work we can be doing together as a community to increase the awareness of things like this. And together, the top 10 NPM packages actually account for more than 61,000 weekly downloads and 18 million total since 2021. So that's huge volume, and that's a huge attack vector surface for these guys to go after. Okay, so this is my favorite part of the program. Please take a photo of this. If I told you today that we had a new vulnerability right now, can you answer these questions? Are you using this exact component? In what applications? Can you track the remediation across the portfolio? And how long until you ship or deploy that update? Any takers on this one? Nobody usually puts their hand up for this one. It's okay. Yeah.
Well, we actually do. We have to track all of that.
Oh, good.
So we have a good idea.
Do you?
Because we have to report it.
Okay. How long is your time?
That I would be most curious about, because it's so variable based on the package.
Yep.
Like, how long would it update? Sometimes it's just a drop-in. Sometimes you have to re-architect the app.
Well, and then there's, do you even need to update? Like, let's say it's a package that doesn't have an update, right? You're using the most update. But then what if your application is not actually using the part of that?
Correct.
The component that's supposed
Right. So I saw you raising your hand in the back.
Oh, I raised it a little bit too early. I was just going to say that we also have pretty detailed SBOM, and we would be able to tell you where we have it. I'm not going to say how long the update would be, because it's longer than I'd like.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
No, I was going to say, I can't give you an exact date. I know approximately what it would take, because I know what our cycle is, and I know what we have to go through to get things pushed out. But, to their point, is there already a patch out there? Most of the time, you hear about these things because there was a responsible disclosure, and that's when it gets pushed out. A few times you hear about it as a 0 day as it's getting pushed out. But again, this is patch Tuesday hits, Wednesday, all the articles start flying.
Oh, yeah.
But also, some of their other points back to, we do the evaluations when we see these things to see if we're actually using that component. There have been many times where we've gotten those reports, we've seen those things flag, we've taken a look at it, and that's just a piece of the thing we're not using.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So you, my friend, are ahead of the curve. So my hat is off to you on that one. And to your point, I like the ship and deploy question. I asked that because it's a variable, right? It depends on what the type of vulnerability is. Is there a patch out there? There's like 85 questions you have to be able to answer to get to that answer, right? So these are just broad stroke questions that I like to ask people to get you thinking about, hey, if something happened, you need to be able to answer these questions quickly.
Well, I would say on that last one though, like by policy, we more have a cadence on how it goes about. So rather than, people saying, hey, look, you got 30 days, you got 60 days, rather than racking your brain over tying yourself to that, understand what your cadence is.
Yep.
And understand based on severity or based on whatever your criteria are, how this thing slots into that cadence. And that's going to give you that sense of, when are you going to get it? Well, okay, I'm not going to give you like, May 35th, 2025 or 2026, but I will tell you, you can expect it on this cycle.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, it also helps you prioritize these things,
Yes.
right? Because then you know, hey, I need to go after these criticals and then, high, medium, and lows next too. So it also helps you be able to prioritize them to know where to spend your time. So again, you're ahead of the curve. Not everyone already has a process for this though.
So I like the questions, I like the metaphor that you give. I think though you're missing something, which is these aren't the questions for the curator. These are the questions for the security person that's judging the curator.
We'll get there.
The development team should also be thinking about where is this component used in the stakeholders of my application. Right?
Oh, we're getting there.
If this is the most important functionality of the system, do I want to ship and deploy this on which cadence? How do I want to do that safely? How do I tell the story of my application in a way that's safe? And then what does that look like and how is that different for different kinds of components?
So that's a great point. I like to put this out early as a little bit of a fear campaign, but I will get to what the developers need to be thinking about. So I don't know if you looked at my slide deck, but you have an insight of where I'm going. It's nice to meet you. So, all right. Pop quiz. What does 15 minutes mean to you? What can you do in 15 minutes? Seriously. You can do a quick workout. Maybe read a chapter.
I was going to say snack break. Similar to
I like your thinking, buddy. What's your snack of choice?
Typically, if it's midday, I'm probably going to go for either a bag of chips or a handful of almonds.
Ooh, you're an almond mom.
I
All
like
right.
crunchy things.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like Doritos. I'm all about that. So the reason I bring up the 15 minutes, right, is because when time is on the threat actor side, right, a new vulnerability will get announced, and within the first 15 minutes, they've already downloaded and started figuring out how it can be particularly valuable to them, right? So, but for cybersecurity professionals, for those of us in this room, is 15 minutes can really make or break you when literally it could be the difference between safety and disaster. So there are things you can do in place like alerting systems or dashboards, right, so that you do know this. But according to a research firm, threat actors start scanning the web for vulnerability endpoints within that 15 minutes of that CVE being announced. So just something to be cautious of. I got disturbed when I read it, so now you know that sad fact too. So what can you do? And this comes back to your question about what developers should be thinking about, right? And the answer is you gotta be like the Girl Scouts of America, Boy Scouts, whoever, be prepared, okay? And there's a few different ways you can do this. One is know what's in your binary, so you know what you're choosing. Also, SBOMs and threats, and then you're choosing your upgrades wisely, and we'll go into some of the criteria on some of this. And then you're also scanning early, often, right? Because it could happen at any time, so we wanna make sure we're looking at the most accurate stuff. And then to your point earlier is we're making sure we have that remediation plan, and we're doing it in a practical manner that can smooth out safely. So let's get into this. First, we're gonna start up here, where we're gonna look at what's in your binary, and then SBOMs, threats, and vulnerabilities. So a few things. I love The Office. I just do, okay? Gifts are my love language, folks. But really, how do you choose, to his point earlier, is how do you choose which components that you're using or libraries? So what you should be thinking of, right, from a developer point of view or even AppSec, is making sure that they're reliable and written by a maintainer, right? You don't want just some random person off the street who's doing it. You're continuously checking to see if you need to upgrade to avoid a new security vuln, and they have that strategy. But you're also breaking things down does it fulfill an engineering requirement? Do I actually need this because it's something that I need in my application, right? Is it easy to use? Is there training associated with it for me to be able to use? If it's open source, is the project well documented? Is it supported? Is there someone who's going to be able to answer a question if I have something? Also, is there a paid version, right? I think Defect Dojo is somewhere around here, but they also have a free version, and then they have the paid one, right, for better support. So there are things out there like that. Is the community thriving? Are people constantly asking questions? Are there a lot of people who want to commit? Is anyone allowed to commit, right? or do we actually vet them? We probably want to avoid like a XC utils thing where poor Lassie Collins, got hijacked because someone just made 2 good commits and, then took the keys to the kingdom. Licensing considerations, like I talked about before, we don't want to give away our product for free. And then, we want to think about the design and the experience too, right? So getting back to a little bit of that. So evaluating open source security, I think this is also a good slide that we all need to think about is how quickly, when we are choosing these components, is how quickly does the community react to new vulnerabilities? So a perfect example is a few weeks ago, NPM, like I was saying, had that problem where people were freaking out, like Chalk's been hijacked, oh my God, all my business runs on it. But what's crazy is the community acted the way it should. It was immediately seeing people like putting in updates being like, hey, something's wrong, this got hijacked. People are commenting on it like, hey, I can help, it's all hands on deck. The community actually did a really great job at responding to a new vulnerability and having everybody's back for it. So, my hat's off to the NPM community and that project community because they really did respond in the way they should. And we don't see that from every project, right? So, there's something to say about that. Is there evidence that the developers work to make it more secure? So are we seeing more security functions in there? Do they have a secure badge on the project, right? Some projects, in their GitHub README files will actually have a security score. Does that mean something to you? Can you avoid using it? That is the big question, right? So for some people, I know a maintainer, he works for a large retailer, and they actually hired this maintainer because that component was so important to their infrastructure, right? Because otherwise this guy was just doing it, 2 a.m., whenever he could. It was so valuable to this retailer, they hired this maintainer. He actually, so we have an open source badging program. We'll run it through our system. He actually gets flagged on something for like a hardening issue. Why? It's because of a dependency of a dependency of a dependency he brought in, and he cannot get off of it. And that dependency is no longer maintained. So he would have to rewrite it or find something else, which he hasn't had the time to do. So, can you avoid using it? In his case, the answer is no right now. And then what about using an existing transitive dependency? Maybe you already brought something in that you could use. Can you vet that? And then will it subvert the system, which is always a very scary thing. So, and this, actually a lot of this I found, there's a best practices working group for open source developers. They have it all on GitHub. There's more of these fun facts on there too. So, I like this slide, much like Bob, in Nebraska, but this really just does show you like vulnerabilities in the components you pulled in. And then there's all the transitive at the bottom, right? It's crazy. You think of that big ball of lights in that mess I was showing earlier. But these are all the ones you also have to think about for security. It can't just be the top half, right? Or the top third or fourth, eighth, whatever you want to call it. There's all this down here that you have to be wondering about if you can answer those security questions on. So, how can you assure you are secure? Maybe it wouldn't be too bad if you're paying for a license, but it would be amazing, in having the reporting. But you have to be able to make sure there are free tools out there you can use that can scan these things, right? So if you don't have the budget for, a paid tool with support, hey, there are free tools out there. But foundational best practices, what I would say is, bottom line, you should be able to ID third-party open source used in your code base. Could be something as simple as just having an Excel spreadsheet. You gotta start somewhere, right? Other people have more advanced systems or programs that they're using where they have a list of everything in their code base, right? And then it will tell you hey, what's the licensing for when an audit comes up, things like that. It just depends on where you're at in your maturity in this. Project quality recommendations, right? So that's also things like legal compliance, project health of the open source components. So is this project, again, is it one that is often updated? Is it? Code quality is also another thing that a lot of people worry about. And then, security. You're making sure you're using the best version. You're not wanting to stay on that vulnerable version. I think I saw a few months ago, I was at, I think like an open source summit, and I saw that people were still downloading the vulnerable version of Log4j. Like, that blows my mind, first of all, how that happens, but it happens, and it's like in the thousands, okay? So you wanna just make sure that you're not picking a riddled with error or problem version of these components. So again, we can look at things like this. This just happens to be one of the free tools, but it can quickly tell you like what's wrong with the package, right? And you're quickly getting that assessment into like, hey, is there a vulnerability? Is there a licensing issue? Is there a hardening issue? Maybe a misconfiguration. It's all these different things, and then you can decide if you want to use that package based on your risk tolerance. So the other cool thing is, though, that when we're looking at these different scanning tools is we have to remember that not all scans are created equal, right? And by that, I mean some scans will just show what the direct dependency is, and some will show all their little scary friends that come in. So you have to be mindful of what type of scan you're using so you can really assess the whole picture. Where are they actually downloaded? You know what I mean? Where is the scan actually downloaded? Do you have CVE data? Are you just looking at CVSS or KEV? It really depends on kind of what you're looking at. Hold on, sorry, my slide deck got weird. And even what I find more disturbing is like, okay, cool. Yeah, we have CVEs, but did you know you only need like 4 characters to open one of them? Like 4 characters, like that is all the info you can put in about it. So some of these have like seriously no information on it. If you get like a kind researcher, sure, they'll like put in a whole thing about it, but a lot of them are pretty slim as to like the descriptions that are talking about what the actual vulnerability is or the issue. Remember back to that string of lights though, this is what I'm talking about when we're looking at a dependency tree and what we're looking at from like not all scans are created equal, right? So you have to be cognizant of things I was mentioning before, but also like what is the snapshot you're looking at. And this is from Snowflake, I believe, is what this project is, so it's gnarly. So, what is a CVE? I've probably said it 52 times in this presentation, so I just want to check. What is a CVE? Any takers, please?
MITRE classification for common vulnerability enumeration is the way to number the known exploits on open source projects and explain what they are.
Man, you get a cool sticker from me at the end of this. So yeah, I can never remember the exposure, like the full acronym, but you got it. Yeah, you were close though. Like that was better than I would have done, I'll be honest. I can never remember the whole name. So it publicly disclosed.
CWE,
Yeah, there's too many of these things you have to like remember, to be honest, at the end of the day, right? So it tells you what is a vulnerability, right? Is there a security flaw that can be exploited? Has that ID, and it includes a description and public reference. Basically just catalogs them. Like I said, you really only need 4 characters to put in there, so some of these don't have that much info, which I just find scary. Now, CVSS, whoa, we have more info now. This is crazy. So now it's been ID'd, and now we can actually measure the severity of this. So this is based on ease of exploitation. So how hard is it for a hacker to get in there and like do its thing, right? How can they exploit this and make it? Why are you two laughing back there?
It looks like a drugstore logo.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Huh, you learn something new every day. That is actually their logo, according to like, the Google. But yeah, so just so we're like aware of like the CVSS scoring system, Log4Shell was really like the only like 10 severity that we've seen out of this, just because of the breadth and depth of it. But here's the bonus one. Who knows what KEV is? And it's not your friend Kevin.
Yeah, I'm not splitting vulnerabilities.
There you go, yeah. So why am I showing you all this, right? CVEs are cool, but then you have CVSS, which tells you like how bad is it, and then you have KEV, which is telling you, hey, there's a problem that's actively exploitable. So like, if you have it, someone is probably gonna be actively attacking it like it's their full-time job, hoping to make a couple bucks. So the reason I bring up all these different things is these are things that you should be looking to like together. It's not just like one or the other. There's a few different things that kind of go into this witchcraft of what you should be looking at when you're looking at some of these packages. And this one's updated by CISA, and CISA has really, in my opinion, I think they've really stepped up in the past few years to try and take over kind of like the NVD from NIST, and they just have better quality of data in it. So I personally have started seeing more from CISA, and just the quality of that data is really good. And I think they've beaten some of NIST to saying like, hey, you need to remediate this before NIST has even said some stuff. I think, forget what it was, but I think it was last summer. So they're on the ball. Okay, what's an SBOM? Oh, man, this room is sharp today. Okay, well, that's cool. You know what that is, so I'm done. Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, so software bill of materials, just like the Toyota factory, right? This comes from manufacturing, so you know everything that goes into the car. Why I think this is good is it also provides clarity on those dependencies that you have in there, right? So you're knowing, it's clarity around what's in your application, where it's used, how it's used, and it tracks down those known and emerging vulnerabilities, so that way you can quickly ID when some of these things come out. You're like, hey, I don't have to find a needle in a haystack today. Cool. And then you can also make informed decisions about your third-party code. So a couple of quick things you can do with it. Again, it tells you exactly what's in the application, but you have to remember, right? This is my huge disclaimer, is not all scans are equal. Some scans can be flawed, so you have to look at a few different things. And whatever that right level of witchcraft is for you, please bottle it up and tell the rest of us. So when we start looking at some of this, right, we have the suppliers who are moving it into the warehouses, and then they go to the manufacturers, and then you ship that good. This is like the software supply chain, right? This is the dumbed down version of it that I can comprehend. But this is really where you're starting to see any point in which a hacker can kind of get in and tamper and do what they do best, right? So there's a lot of different places where they are checking out these dependencies and to see what they can do. So it could be like in a warehouse, it could be in your product, and it could be at the manufacturer, right? Someone who's making it. So there's a lot of different places where these guys can go to hang out and attack. Just, you know, something to think about. One of those ways is like the SBOM helps with telling you where those different components are and the fun stuff I just showed you, but there are two standards. I have a feeling most people in this room will like Cyclone DX for obvious reasons, because that is a no-loss project from Steve Springett. And then there's SPDX from Linux Foundation. But if I'm being totally honest, I think the SBOM war is kind of like over. And I would say like Cyclone DX won. That's just my personal opinion. You know, tell me I'm wrong. So upgrading and choosing wisely. Why continuous upgrades? Helps you keep up with your technical debt. I mean, we all know there is massive amounts of technical debt, but continuously upgrading is one easy thing you can do to help with that. There's also common upgrade patterns that you can look at, right, to see when these things are happening, when you should be upgrading. It might be a different cycle for you than him, than her, but there usually is some method to that madness. Safety considerations, right? So you're looking at those things like safety and herd. Hi.
Why do you prefer Cyclone to speed?
I just think it's more widely used, to be honest, and there's a few more bells and whistles in it than SPDX has, and a lot more people I find have trouble with generating the SPDX version.
For example, do you have an example?
I can't, honestly, I think this is more of my emotions, like getting the better of me. Like, Andy, I know you're gonna have like an opinion.
So with SPDX, it's a great standard. It tends to be about 30% fatter in output than a Cyclone DX. It omits some things that Cyclone DX captures, right? So they're competing standards with different specifications.
Yeah.
Both of them got SBOM down to a science, but I think Cyclone DX, for example, has an ML bomb.
That's right, yeah.
Right, so they're innovating faster. The output is leaner, which when you try and run it downstream into something like a ServiceNow or whatever, if you try and stuff a 120 meg
SBOM file, JSON file into ServiceNow, it has a bad day.
Yeah.
That same file would be closer to 80 meg if it's like India. All done, thank you.
No, thanks for the peanut gallery support. I needed that. Everybody should have a help desk guy like Andy in the back, just saying. Yeah, so, and we'll get to safety in the herd, because I bring this up all the time. This is also from another study that I think I read through the Linux Foundation, but this is just showing like the types of upgrading decisions people typically make, right? So if you are not very mature in this, you are making like, you're living in disarray. It's like pure chaos. People might be running around like chickens with their head cut off, but you're making non-standard decisions. So there is really no process in place for how you're doing these upgrades. Often typically very manual workflows, and it's just simply not scalable, right? It's chaos. Then over here, you get living on the edge. So living on the edge means like you are staying up to date with the latest that comes out every time. That sounds cool, but in reality, like that's where you can also have some issues, right? They might have infected the latest version. So like living on the edge, yeah, it's scalable. You can make simple decisions, you can do automation, but you're also probably gonna get burned by having those quick upgrades, right? So you usually try and stay like 1 off or 2 off from those upgrades just to make sure there is no defect in that update. So that's why I like to say living close to the edge, a little dangerously, is really where you want to work and live. So that's having a process down, it's automated. You're making contextual decisions, so that's understanding why and what you're doing, also in the process of what that app does. So it's structured, it's also scalable, which makes everybody's life a lot better. Cool. So again, I just, take a photo. These are some tips that I thought would be helpful in understanding like how you can make sure you're picking not only the best packages, but how to just stay in that maintenance mode and really stay securely. Because at the end of the day, things will happen. This is the scream. This is a great painting. Why am I showing you this? This thing has been stolen like 72 times, okay? It always finds its way back to where it's supposed to be, which is the miracle of this. Like, it's not like the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, but you have to realize like things will happen. There might be multiple variations of it, right? One is, these are both the oil paintings, but one was stolen in like 1854, and the next one in 1912, and I think most recently, FYI, it was stolen in 2007. So these things just happen, and I like that it also shows there's different versions. This is the pastel version, so there's 4 of them. Each have been stolen at a different time, okay? So you just gotta be prepared. How are you gonna track down that painting, right? How are you gonna know where it went, who took it, why they took it, and what impact does it have on your life? And so you're not like this, screaming. So my final parting words, like I told you guys, scouting honor here. Be prepared. Dependency maps and SBOMs make finding vulnerable packages easy, but also keeps you safer, right? The thing is you're making sure you have that routine in an automated, updated way that's scalable. And you're also making sure it's routine. And I say routine because it shouldn't just be like a one-off thing where you're like, you know what? It's Christmas. I think we should figure it out. And we're just going to check a box today, right? You should be doing these things like once a month or once a quarter, whatever your cadence is, right? Make sure you're trusting those libraries that you use, right? Everybody wants to be a part of a community where you have that NPM reaction where, hey, the community is like having an uproar, being like something is not right when something does go wrong. So you want to see those signs from the communities that you are actively in. Is it being documented? Are people raising their hand? And that's kind of, that's my spiel. Yeah. And those are some tools that you can go look at. Secure.software is some of the screenshots I was showing. It's a free tool. OWASP Top 10, obviously. Linux Foundation, that was developing secure software framework. So there's a little bit about that. And then I also, I didn't talk about AI purposely today. I made sure I stayed away from that one. But there is Gen AI guidelines from OWASP that have been created. So that's my spiel. Thanks for hanging out. Any questions? I know that's like a dangerous thing, but like we'll allow a few. No, I think we've asked them as we've gone. Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations around running like a registry proxy, like your own version of like
Ooh.
a VM proxy?
So that's a good one. I do think like a proxy, like an MCP server, is something that is good best practice. And we've started seeing more and more people like asking for that, and like other companies have started doing that on a more regular basis. I think it's a sign of maturity if you are doing something like that, so you can wait from time of download so you're not infecting yourself.